We're benchmarking where the winds meet today, and I'll be honest, this game has kind of slipped under my radar. I hadn't really I don't know, it wasn't on my radar, but I checked the most played games on Steam today and saw that it's number 5. So I dug into this a little bit further. I think this is worth testing out. For one thing, it's not Unreal Engine 5. From what I can tell, it is a custom engine. And also it's free to play. So interesting. Now, free to play, I always worry about pay to win, but scrolling through the very positive reviews on Steam, I'm seeing a lot of stuff about this being basically it's cosmetics that you paying for, which doesn't really affect gameplay. That's my preferred option in free-to-play stuff. I guess some certain mounts can automatically gather some resources for you, but that doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. And apparently this game had been out for a long time in other regions, and so far has honored that system of it not being pay to win. Also, it seems to be kind of being described as a single player open world, but kind of MMO style. I don't know, it seems really interesting. So let's go ahead and test out the performance. The system requirements have a minimum GPU of a GTX 1060 6GB or RX 480 8GB, and a CPU of an i7 7700K or Ryzen 5 1600. And they do recommend an SSD. The recommended GPU is an RTX 2070 Super or a RX 6700 XT or an ARC A570, with the recommended CPUs jumping up to a i7 10700 or a Ryzen 7 3700X. Now, what we're going to test out in this video is a variety of hardware. Now, I'm going to start with the system that's close to the recommended spec. The 2070 Super is pretty similar in performance to the RTX 3060, which I have put in my system right now and is also the most popular GPU on Steam, so I figured I'd rather default to this to be more likely to line up to people's hardware. But again, if you have something in this general ballpark, you'll get an idea of where that is. We'll then also try out some other GPUs. Like I do have a GTX 1060, so we can try out the minimum. And also, I'm not going to put this in a high-end CPU at first until we test out some higher-end GPUs. We're going to start out with a Ryzen 5 5600X, which is a newer generation than the 3700X, but with fewer cores, and I would say is kind of more similar to kind of in between these. In general, we're starting out close to the recommended spec, and then we'll go from there, probably throw in the minimum GPU and then some higher-end stuff. That's the plan for the video, and let's go ahead and jump in. But first, you know that feeling when you just listen to a 6-hour podcast and now you want to find some direct quote from that? Well, GetRecall.ai, sponsored link in the video description, can absolutely help you with this. Recall is an AI-powered knowledge base / personal AI encyclopedia that lets you summarize, save, chat with, and always recall content that you care about, from all your online content to your own personal notes. There's a web app, a mobile app, and what I'm showing you right now is the Recall browser extension. So not only can it give you a summary, but also you can get a text transcript, and it's doing this from Spotify. There's a lot of tools out there that aren't compatible with stuff. This can do Spotify, it can do YouTube, it can do your own notes, it can do various websites, PDFs, whatever. Throw it in there, good chance it's going to work. And not only can I get the summary and with timestamps, a transcript, all of that. Also notice I can save this and bring it into my main Recall page, and here notice it gets automatically categorized under history, World War II, everything's here. I can refer to this later, chat with it, generate quizzes to study it, all sorts of stuff. It's also great for, let's say you're researching building your own gaming PC. Maybe you watched my hour-long video about that, and then Hardware Unboxed comes out with their video. Oh no, what should I go with? How are they similar? How are they different? Well, check this out. Not only can you generate a graph of this content where you can see my video, see their video, and then you can see where there's overlap between these pieces of content. Like, ooh, are we both recommending the Montex Century 2? Maybe I should click on that, find out more about it. Boom, I can learn that this is a power supply, ATX 3.1, 80 plus gold, various content, pulls all that up right there. But also I can chat with my knowledge base, not just with the internet. I can chat with specifically these pieces of content that I'm talking about here. And I can ask a question and refer back to the question that I already asked earlier today. So comparison of Daniel's PC advice and Hardware Unboxed recommendations. And you can see timestamp to both videos where it's getting these comparisons between that. So this can be great if you're researching the PC parts that you want to buy. Recall has other great features like augmented browsing, where you can see that keywords get highlighted and link back to other pieces of content you've already saved on that same idea. Like here, it's referring back to one of my other videos related to this topic. And use code Owen25 to get yourself 25% off a premium subscription to Recall until December 1st, 2025. So click the link in the video description or pinned comment today. All right, let's get into the benchmarking. So my plan is to play through the first, section of the game, edit out any boring bits where nothing's happening if needed, and you can monitor the CPU performance here. This is how much each core is loaded. This is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU. You can see the current frame rate here. I can start a benchmark average, in which case you will see the average frame rate in the middle and then the 1% lows on the right. And one really important thing to monitor is the frame time graph. Don't judge the smoothness of the gameplay based on the video footage, which is being captured at a locked 60 FPS, but the game is going to be allowed to run at whatever frame rate it's running at without VSync or frame rate capping. So stutters will be indicated by spikes in this frame time graph. So let's go ahead and just get into the benchmarking. All right, we're gonna just hit start and see what happens. So far, it has not given me the opportunity to adjust graphic settings or anything. Social preferences, shared journey or lone wanderer. I'm gonna go with the solo option. Headphones, highly recommended. Well, you know what? I should probably actually be able to hear the game while we benchmark it. Okay, so I'm definitely seeing some frame time spikes on camera cuts in this intro cutscene, which is a bit annoying. You can see the 1% lows dropping to 5 FPS. So that's not great. Graphic settings are whatever it defaulted to. I'm on a 1440p output, as far as I know. I mean, the monitor was set to that. Well, the capture card was set to that. Yeah, another frame time spike on a camera cut. Another frame time spike. Frame time spike as we get into actual gameplay. Woo, I am playing on a controller for this style of game, and I need a inverted camera. Well, we're stuck for now. Hopefully I get more options soon. Okay, so quick time events on the little intro cutscene, etc. Graphics looks okay, nothing spectacular. Again, we'll have to see what graphic settings it defaulted to once I get the ability to do so. Yeah, guys, I need to invert the controls. Oh no. Oh no, I can't hit like escape to get a menu or anything. Yeah, well, it's gonna be one of those games where you have to play for a while, I think, before I can actually change settings. And that is not ideal if they're not the settings default that you want. Okay, the art style on the grass right now with the flowers and everything really reminds me of Ghost of Tsushima. Yeah, 1% lows aren't great here. So yeah, it seems like we're mostly able to hold a 60 FPS average, but it just has some stutters. So I'm wondering if this is shader compilation, where if we ran through this section again, if those 1% lows would be smoothed out. That would be an indication that it was shader pre-compilation. So I'm actually gonna do that. I'm gonna see if I can just cut the game and restart it. All right, so restarting the game, still selecting the DX12 mode, which is the game mode I had originally done. I'm curious if we run through this same intro sequence again, if we're gonna still be seeing those big stutters on camera cuts. If we don't, that's an indication that those were shader pre-compilation issues where it just missed things, but it catches it the second time through. Go ahead and start the frame rate averages so we can monitor the 1% lows. And yeah, interestingly, it still seems like it's, the game's trying to VSync, so it's trying to shoot for 60 FPS, and then 1% lows are in the 30s now, but the difference is we were getting single-digit 1% lows our first time through, and on these camera cuts, we were getting huge frame time spikes. So right now, while it's not absolutely perfect, look how much better the frame time graph looks than everything. So what this indicates to me is the game's initial shader pre-compilation step, which it definitely has one, just didn't catch some of these shaders that you see in this intro cutscene, which just seems a little bit sloppy, not the greatest introduction to the game. Curious if that's going to be the case as we actually play through the game world as well, if we're going to get stutters as we enter new areas, see new things, new effects, which would be unfortunate, but also is unfortunately how a lot of games are these days. All right, let me catch back up to where we were before. All right, yeah, this intro section has been performing a lot smoother now the second pass through. Oh, there was a little bit of a spike right there, but I think that was just the game actually running below 60 FPS. Again, it still hasn't given me a detailed like options menu to control, change my camera inversion on my controller, or really see what the graphics settings are yet. But whatever the game is defaulting to seems to mostly hold 60 FPS, and we're back to where we were before. So again, now we'll start seeing potentially some shader compilation stutters again as we get into things we haven't seen yet. So let's go ahead and play. Maybe we're going to get some initial boss fight. Hopefully it'll allow me to adjust my controls before we actually have to fight something for real. We'll see. Yeah, notice it tells me full settings unlock in the open world. So I need to make it to the open world before I can adjust my settings. All right, so basically you get some various skills and things. Neat. All right, at this point, I think I'm just going to play off camera until we hit the open world section where I can actually adjust settings, etc. One nice touch I'll mention is you can fast forward cutscenes, so you can control the playback speed, which is kind of nice to have that option. Not a lot of games do that I've noticed, so that's kind of neat at least. Again, I'm not sure what the default graphic settings are, but look at how pixelated the trees were in the background when there's like that depth of field effect, so that's certainly not looking great. Still haven't made it to the open world where I can actually adjust settings though. We finally made it, guys. I can invert the vertical camera. Again, seems like a weird gameplay design choice to, as far as I can tell, have limited that option till after some gameplay sequences have happened. Anyway. All right, we can also see what the default graphic settings were. So again, it was defaulting to 1440p, which is what I'd set the capture card monitor resolution at. DLSS quality, so it wasn't a native 1440p, but DLSS quality, 1440p output generally looks pretty good here. And the graphics quality was set to a balanced preset, which seems to be ambient occlusion low, tessellation low, vegetation quality medium, lighting low, view distance medium, effects quality low, reflection quality medium, real-time sunlight enabled. So basically a mix of medium and low settings with DLSS quality for that 1440p output. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of the frame rate limiter, which it also defaulted to, and let's disable. Wait, which one's actually selected? VSync disable there. I'm pretty sure it was defaulted off. And now we should be able to get an idea of what the actual performance numbers are at the upper bounds of the GPU. You'll also maybe see some screen tearing now since we are not VSync locking anymore. So keep in mind that if you want a variable refresh rate display, you would not see that. And again, in actual gameplay, sometimes it's nicer to set a frame rate limit. Ooh, definitely got a frame rate spike there. Yeah, so interesting. All right, so this is probably not the most demanding area of the game or anything, but at these settings, seems like we're kind of in the mid 70s, but again, can hit some frame rate spikes at times. So again, I'll play a little bit here and see if we get any into more of a more demanding sort of area. Again, still not in a crazy demanding area or anything, but, you know, lots of foliage, which in a lot of games is pretty demanding, but, you know, still averaging actually in the upper 70s, even low 80s FPS range. You can certainly see that not everything's drawing super detailed into the distance and all that. But yeah, performance overall seems pretty solid other than the occasional frame time spike. But honestly, for a lot of the running around, I haven't been noticing that, but there certainly have been times where it does occur. As the sun starts to go down, you do see, like, even if the graphics aren't like super technically impressive, like I'm not seeing like amazingly detailed textures, you know, that anyway, the point is, I do think the art style here looks pretty nice. Like that's a nice looking scene. And honestly, art style can make up for a lot of, you know, if you don't have the most advanced technical art, you can still have things look pretty nice. So there is that. And again, we're still not on super heavy graphic settings anyway, which we will certainly test out later in the video on higher end hardware, maybe even on this hardware. Get a little bit of combat going here, maybe. Okay, this looks like kind of in the upper to mid 60s here. Sorry, I'm trying to look at, even into the 70s, trying to look at the frame rate counter while also doing the fighting, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, yeah, so performing well here. The game looks nice. Again, we're running on a 3060, just, 1440p monitor output, DLSS quality. So things certainly seeming to run well, like I said, other than the occasional stutter or so. But it certainly hasn't been all the time that it's been stuttering or anything like that. So we'll have to see how things go as we continue playing. Still kind of just playing through this initial open world section, so not super far into the game yet or anything, but things are, the graphics look nice with the sunset. Again, it's kind of more the art style, I think, pulling things than any like technical details, but I think that's absolutely fine. And performance is still kind of hanging out in that 70s to 80s range for the most part. So yeah, I'll keep playing a bit here and kind of see if we run into any issues, but so far seems pretty solid other than the occasional stutter. Definitely had a little bit of a stutter as I entered this first kind of more populated area, so that's something I'll be interested in, is with more characters on the screen, how that performs. Okay, now in this town area, I'm noticing if I stand still, my performance is around 70 FPS, and the GPU is the limiting factor. It's 100% utilized. But then I notice as I start running around, performance drops considerably. Now down to around 60 or so, and the GPU utilization also kind of drops along with that, indicating that you might be, something else is the limiting factor. Oftentimes that's a CPU limitation. Now one thread is looking fairly high here on the CPU usage. It kind of bounces around. I don't know, so just an interesting performance note there, and I can drop below 60 here as I run around. So again, just another performance characteristic to note. Again, as I ran into this area, we saw a bit of a frame time spike. So yeah, performance in this more populated area, especially while moving, seems a bit worse. Again, I'm curious if I just stand still now, if performance starts to go back up. Okay, kind of in the mid-60s or so here when not moving, but kind of dropping into the mid to upper 50s when I am moving. So definite performance characteristic to note in more populated environments. A little bit of combat encounter in this populated area. Combat seems to be going pretty well, though. Currently kind of in the mid-60s. Occasional dip in the 1% lows still, though. But yeah, overall, certainly perfectly playable again on the RTX 3060 setup here. All right, so given that this town area seems to be the most demanding area I've encountered so far, and I do want to start testing out some other hardware and things, I think we'll run through some graphics settings changes here on this hardware, and then try out the minimum GPU with the 1060, and then switch over to some higher end systems. So again, we're kind of averaging. Here, let me restart the averages. So running around this town area with the 3060 at this kind of balanced graphics preset, 1440p output with DLSS quality. Again, it's around 60 FPS or so, with definitely dipping below when I'm running, and kind of when I stand still, hitting over the 60 FPS line. Again, we were out in the little emptier areas in the open world. It wasn't so bad, and it does seem like there's some stress on both the CPU and the GPU and underlying subsystems, since that the GPU is not always near 100% utilization when we're seeing this kind of lower performance. So that's something to take into account. Oh, it looks like I got into another cutscene here. All right, anyway, out of the cutscene now. So in this area, I think it'll be interesting to test out some different graphic settings. So for example, we could use more aggressive upscaling, but I don't think that's really going to do much for us because because it looks like when we're dipping in performance as we run around, it doesn't seem to be GPU limited. So if I go all the way down to performance mode upscaling, you would expect that to increase performance if you're GPU limited. I'm curious if we're going to see that being the case. So here as I run around, I'd say we're still dipping below 60 FPS at times. Again, the GPU utilization dropping even lower now. So yeah, that's further indication that the low performance in this town area isn't really the RTX 3060's fault. It's kind of this the underlying system here. So more to do with the Ryzen 5 5600X and all of that. So yeah, interesting. The next thing to check would be, what if we actually lowered the graphics settings overall, and see if that helps. Now they're already fairly low given we're on this balanced preset. We could go to the performance mode preset and see if that helps anything. Now, oftentimes you need, in many games, you need to restart the game to apply them. So I haven't done that yet. Let's see if there's any noticeable difference, and then I could try a restart. Yeah, we're still kind of bouncing around that 60-ish FPS line. So two options here. One is that you need to restart the game to get any increased performance. The other option is that it's just not helping with the CPU limited performance that I think is what we're actually seeing here. I will restart the game, though, to see if that helps. All right, I've restarted the game, so we're still on the 1440p output, but we're now in the performance mode graphics preset, so basically everything down to low, DLSS performance, and still kind of getting the same sort of issues in the town area where it can dip kind of into the 50s when you're running around. Let me actually start the frame rate averages so we can see that. Yeah, as I run through this area, we can dip to around 60. Okay, this actually seems like the overall performance might be a little bit higher now on the full restart. Although here we, yeah, still can see it dip under 60 there, at least momentarily. So it looks like going everything to low may have helped what I think is CPU limited performance a little bit, but nothing dramatic. So it doesn't seem like there's a lot you can do. So if you're on a weaker CPU than even the 5600X, it's possible that town areas are going to be a little bit rough. Next thing we could look at, though, is what if I increase the graphics settings, and it looks like a restart will be the right way to go here. It's always the best practice anyway. But let's go. We've tested out performance mode and balance mode. Let's try out quality mode. But I'm going to bring the DLSS back to quality as well with that. And again, we're on the 1440p output, and I will restart the game. All right, restarted the game on the quality preset with DLSS quality upscaling, 1440p output. And again, seeming to get similar performance in this town area, definitely averaging more, in the below 60 range, kind of as we run through the towns. There's certainly worse performance than we got on the performance preset, but nothing too crazy. Now, if I watch the GPU utilization, though, it does seem to be more GPU limited now than we were before. So by increasing the graphics settings, it certainly seems like we are increasing the burden on the GPU to more match about where the CPU could hit. So anyway, looks like the sun is up now, so that'll add a variable to our testing here. But yeah, it looks like we're around 60-ish FPS in this town area with, a lot of characters and everything going on at these settings. So that seems pretty doable on this kind of recommended hardware for the game. Now let's go ahead and test out what if we just tried to max things out. By going up to the Ultra preset. Looks like that shifts everything up to high. Looks like high and Ultra. And so yeah, I think that is giving us the maximum setting available for everything. I'll leave it on DLSS quality since we are on a 3060 with 1440p output. And we'll reset the game with these settings. By the way, one thing I like is that when I choose exit, I can exit directly to desktop. Not every PC game lets you do that. Sometimes you have to go back to the title screen stuff, which is annoying. So anyway, that's at least good. All right, restarted the game on the Ultra preset. Again, 1440p output, DLSS quality. And yeah, we're definitely more in kind of the 40s rather than the 50 to 60 range that we were getting before. And if I look at the GPU utilization, we're nearer to 100%. So this is definitely just a little too heavy for the 3060 at these settings. Now, that being said, we can ease the burden on the GPU a bit with the DLSS settings if we want to lower the internal rendering resolution. So I'm going to try going down to DLSS balanced to see how the max graphics preset holds up on DLSS balanced upscaling, but otherwise trying to max things out on the 1440p display. Again, seems like we're kind of into the mid-50s now rather than the 40s by lowering that internal rendering resolution a bit. Still mostly GPU limited, although at times we're dipping a little bit. Like I saw 88% there for a second. So looks like sometimes as we transition into a slightly different area, it seems like there's a bit of a underlying system limitation kind of popping up on that. So yeah, overall, it looks like playing the game on the RTX 3060. Depending on what sort of frame rate target you're looking to hit, and again, as I run outside of the town, performance goes up a bit. It seems like you can get away with some pretty high settings if needed. Again, seeing some frame time spikes at times, though, as you kind of transition zones and things. So yeah, overall, I would say performance looks pretty reasonable on the 3060 class of hardware, though. And again, this is trying to max the thing out, and it's doing okay. I'd probably stick to a little bit lower settings, though. Overall graphic style of the game, I think, looks nice and is giving, putting in some work here performance-wise. I am interested, though, in testing out those minimum graphics settings, which we can see, minimum recommended GPU, so minimum GPU of the GTX 1060. So I'm going to throw that into this same system with the 5600X CPU and see how that goes. All right, I've switched to the GTX 1060, which again is the minimum GPU for the game on the NVIDIA side, and I've actually left things at the ultra graphics settings just to see how bad it is. I have switched to 1080p output resolution target though, so this is 1080p ultra settings, and actually we're pretty dang close to sticking to 30 FPS, although we're not in the town area yet. There's... what the heck is this? Okay, so we're overhearing something there. Neat. All right, what I would like to do, though, is run into the town area and see just how bad that gets before we go any further. Obviously, the ultra settings on the minimum GPU, not really the way we're going to intend to play the game. I'm just curious as kind of just to see how rough is it. Again, running into the town area is more demanding than that more kind of open worldy area. Definitely into the 20s here. So yeah, clearly not the way we're going to want to play the game. That being said, though, that was at a native 1080p resolution. So before we switch off of Ultra, it might still at least be fun to play around with upscaling a little bit. So we had FSR turned off. Again, there's no DLSS on GTX cards. So where is my FSR setting here? Is it under, okay, super resolution types. We've got FSR, XeSS. FSR should be more performant. So we could go all the way down to like 59% resolution seems to be the lowest it lets it go. Or wait, why is it? Oh no, LTRT, there we go. Okay, so actually we could go lower. You can go actually even below 50%. 50% would be like performance mode, so maybe we'll try that first. So we got performance mode, upscaling, 1080p output. You can see things are looking very chunky and pixelated in motion now. And performance is still only kind of around the mid-30s to 40 range. So yeah, clearly not going to stick to the ultra settings. Let's just go ahead and leave those and try out just dropping straight down to the performance preset, which is everything at low. But again, we will restart the game for best practice on making sure everything applied. All right, this is everything at the low settings, and also with the FSR in performance mode. And looks like we can get over 60 FPS even in the town area, even kind of averaging closer to 70 or so. And again, though, that is with performance mode upscaling and the performance mode graphics. Things are looking a little pixelated. Running out here out of the town area, performance is higher, as we were noting before on the 3060. Looks like now we're kind of in the mid-70s, even up into the 80s. Can even approach 90 at times. So I feel like maybe the performance mode upscaling is not necessarily going to be needed, even if we stay on the low settings otherwise. So we'll take the FSR percentage. You know what? Let's actually just turn off the upscaling for a second so that we'll be at full resolution. So this is just low settings, but no upscaling. And actually looks like at least out in the open world here, we're going to be averaging kind of in the mid-60s. So that's pretty good. Let's see if we can still hit around that into the town area. Okay, dropping into the 50s now with the 1% lows in the 40s. So yeah, as you can see, there's more on screen now with this. We're getting into the town area, certainly more into the 50s. But certainly looks like playing on the, even dropped in the upper 40s there for a second. So it looks like the game is playable at a native 1080p low settings without upscaling. So if you don't want to get the pixelated FSR upscaling, you could certainly play at these settings. You don't have to be locked to 60 FPS on older hardware. Certainly acceptable, in my opinion, to be in kind of the 40 to 60 FPS range, especially if you have a variable refresh rate display. But let's go ahead and try out if I do hit FSR. Keep it to, let's go with 67%. That'd be like quality mode upscaling. Let's see if that's enough to get us closer to 60 FPS in the town area. Remember, there's also some CPU limitation here, although actually looking like the GPU is 100% of the limit based on what we're currently reporting on this, though. So yeah, and that gets us closer to 60 FPS in the town area. I'm certainly noticing more pixelation in motion from the FSR upscale. Because again, this obviously isn't going to be FSR 4 since we're on older hardware here, not AMD's 9000 series. But yeah, running out into the more open area, things are less demanding. Seems like we're getting up into the 70s and even 80s at times. So yeah, I would say the game is perfectly playable on the minimum spec GTX 1060. It's just going to be kind of up to you on how much do you want to use upscaling, because you could just play it native 1080p. But yeah, certainly in the more demanding areas would be below 60 on that. Let's go ahead and switch to the opposite, which would be, let's see how a 5090 and a 9800X 3D does. All right, I've swapped in the RTX 5090 and 9800X 3D base system. So basically we're now looking at the fastest gaming PC money can buy. And let's start up the benchmark averages. And this is at ultra settings at a native 4K resolution. So no upscaling or anything. Looks like in this more open sort of area, we are in the 150-ish FPS range. So certainly well suited for native 4K max settings on a high refresh rate 4K display. And I want to be clear, that's with no upscaling or frame generation. Let's double check that. So our ultra settings, super resolution is closed. That's just max settings, everything. Now, if we do go to DLSS, let's look at using DLSS quality, which depending on the anti-aliasing technique, sometimes will look better than the actual built-in anti-aliasing. Looks like this gets us up to around 170s or so in the same sort of area. And again, still looks pretty great on the 4K display. Let's go ahead and run into the little town area, see how performance does on that. Again, curious if we get a little more CPU limited or anything. Actually, looks like we are. So the GPU utilization is now dropping to around the 80s or so. So what we're seeing right now is the limits of the 9800X 3D in this town environment. And it appears to be, still it looked like to be 140-ish or so when it kind of dips at times, 150-ish. 1% lows are only 86 or so. But yeah, so that's the performance maxed out on the maxed out sort of system. Now I am curious actually if we now drop the rendering resolution by going down to DLSS performance mode, if we're going to see much performance improvement in this town area. Because again, if I'm correct that it's more CPU limited here, yeah, still dips to the 140 or so range, even lowering the internal rendering resolution. Yeah, so it looks like that's the limits of the 9800X 3D in the town area. And as we run out of the town area, I have a feeling we'll be more GPU limited than CPU limited, and might see overall frame rates go up a bit higher. Yeah, it seems like here we're now kind of in the 180s or so. But yeah, actually we're seeing a GPU limitation is not always the case, especially as it loads things in, then it looks like it becomes more GPU limited. What I'm watching here is the GPU usage percentage in the top left. If it's not near 100%, we are likely a bit system limited, something other than the GPU. Usually that's a CPU limitation. Seems like as you kind of load in different environments, that can be the case, but now we're closer to the 200-ish FPS line. And of course, on this series of GPU, we could even kick on frame generation, etc., but I don't think that would really be needed at this high of a frame rate. So that is that. Now I have to get my daughter to a birthday party soon and edit this video and upload it first. So I think that's going to be all the testing I'm going to run here because I think we've seen what we need to see. I think my overall thoughts on the game are it seems absolutely playable on lower end hardware. And the biggest performance complaint I have seemed to be a little bit of stutter as you transition areas, especially the first time through where it did seem to be some shader compilation stutter. It doesn't seem to be a major issue during normal gameplay, but it is going to be annoying for people, certainly your first time through various areas. But yeah, seem to work well and have a lot of scalability on the lower end systems. And the 5090, is certainly running it super well, obviously. But again, like I don't think any of the graphics, even at the ultra settings, are super impressive from a technical standpoint. But that does mean the game is not super hard to run. And I think the overall art style, when we look at it here, has a lot going for it, and that can carry a game. I honestly think the art looking good is more important for how a game looks than the technical details of how it's being done, like ray tracing or etc. In other words, the point is like the sun over the hills here with the fog and like all of the grass blowing in the wind and everything. This looks nice. And it is very performant. And I think it's certainly intriguing that this is a free-to-play game. So there's no reason you guys couldn't go ahead and check it out on your own system. It doesn't cost you anything. And I think that's what I've got for you guys today. I hope all of you have an excellent day and found the video useful and or interesting.